Hey everybody, I'm Alexis. This is my husband Garrett, and today we're continuing the series about how the types can be annoying. So today it's the ENTP's turn. And so just a quick note about this series, it's mostly just a provocative title that we thought was kind of clickable, but we just want to provide growth advice for all the types. And so it's not that like all ENTPs do all of these things. It's mostly there's a spectrum of healthy to unhealthy, and I notice these behaviors a lot more on the unhealthy end of the spectrum. Yeah. But even on the unhealthy end of the spectrum, it's not like 100% of unhealthy ENTPs do these things. And a lot of these behaviors are not going to be exclusive to ENTPs as well, because ENTPs are going to share some functions in the same spots with some other types. So these behaviors are not going to be exclusive to ENTPs. So with those caveats kind of out of the way, ENTPs are one of my favorite types, like for sure top 5. If we want to talk about what we like about them, I think they're super funny, very charismatic. Like for my preferences of humor, I think they're so funny. Like if any type is going to make me like cry laughing, it's probably an ENTP because I just think they're hilarious. I find them to be really good conversationalists, super intelligent. Like you can have all sorts of different types of conversations with ENTPs. I've known one that's a lawyer, and you have those types of like intelligent conversations. They all kind of, a lot of them that I know actually have kind of intellectual type jobs. And so you can have like really intelligent conversations with them, but at the same time, they're not just like this bookworm that lacks social skills. They're very charismatic. And so I feel that like no matter what scenario they're in, they do really well.
Yeah, I agree. I think conversations are like a highlight of meeting an ENTP. I think they have great conversation skills. I think they are, super insightful, super creative. I think as an ISFP, it seems like I'm on different wavelengths from like ENTPs or INTPs. I don't know. I feel like we don't really get each other, but
it's like you like each other, but
we like each other fine, but it's like complete different thought processes on a lot of things. But I think their conversation skills are phenomenal. I think they're super creative, quirky, fun to be around. So common mistypes we want to go over. If you're watching this video and some of this stuff doesn't resonate, a lot of times if you've just taken one test, you can be like one letter off. So if you've tested an ENTP one time and this doesn't resonate, maybe check out like ESTP or ENTJ. Those are 2 common mistypes for this personality.
Yeah, and if you get the J or P letter wrong, it changes all the cognitive functions, so it creates a completely different personality. Yeah, so let's get into the cognitive functions, I guess, right now.
Sweet.
So we're going to put on the screen the 4 cognitive functions. So their first cognitive function is extroverted intuition. It's abbreviated NE. It's on the screen. So intuition is the opposite of sensing. So sensing are the things, it's like your experiences that you can experience through your 5 senses. Things that you experience beyond your 5 senses, then you're experiencing that through intuition. So that could be like the future or an idea. It's like you have an idea, but you didn't experience that idea like through your 5 senses. So the word extroverted means to turn outward. So it's turning outward toward these possibilities. How can we bring these ideas to life? And it's really good at generating a lot of different ideas. How can we take this idea that's in my head and bring it to life externally? So it's a very innovative and creative function. Their second function is introverted thinking. So it's turning inward, introverted, toward your thoughts. And it's not the thoughts that people have out here. And because it's your own inner thoughts, it can be kind of contrarian. And it's a lot about how are my thoughts distinct from other people's thoughts. So it makes a lot of distinctions. It's very precise, very methodical, and very accurate. Their third function is extroverted feeling. So it's turning outward to the feelings of the group. And it's kind of taking the temperature of how the feelings are in the group. So this could be people's feelings. This could be people's emotions. This could be group norms. It's like, how do we feel about talking about politics? Do we feel good about that, or that's not okay? So it can be about group norms as well. And then their fourth function is introverted sensing. So it's turning inward and processing your sensory experiences that you've had. And so that's pretty much a memory. So it's going inward and processing your experiences, maybe like reliving the day and gleaning a bunch of meaning from it. It could be really liking stories. It's kind of like processing a sensory event. It can be about tradition, and since it's ENTP's fourth function, sometimes it like comes out sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't come out, because you've got that first function that's more like innovative and futuristic. So it can be about tradition. It can be by the book. It's very, but mostly just going inward and processing your sensory experiences. So those are their 4 functions. So now let's get into starting with their first function, what we find annoying. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I found, and we talked about this with ENFPs also, who share that first function of NE, that a lot of times can be, so there's so many things going on, like NE is very exploratory that they miss minor details where they're SI and a lower. They can miss details, and so it can show up as things such as like procrastinating or showing up late or like overcommitting. A lot of times, especially on the extroverted side, you can overcommit to so many things. You want to try a lot of different stuff, but then you overcommit, and so you fail on some major commitments along the way.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. Sometimes those details they miss are pretty big details. Like, a story of one who, like, booked the flight for the wrong month, and then when they got there, fell asleep in the airport, and then had to reroute to this new city, and then on the way back, it's like a 24-hour layover instead of a 2-hour layover. And so it was, like, these 6 different mishaps. So sometimes it can be, like, actually pretty big details that I notice that they miss.
Yeah.
One, and this is... So I have a list, a kind of a running list of all the types I know. And I know 7 ENTPs. They're all male, and most of them are in their 40s. So just to give you some demographic information about the ENTPs that I know. A couple of them are in their 20s. But 4 out of the 7 of them have issues with the thing that I'm about to mention. And they're pretty serious. So I'm not saying that all ENTPs have these issues because they're pretty serious, but 4 out of the 7 that I know do. So those 4... Well, actually, I can't speak to some of them. I don't know if the other ones have. But those ones, they have cheated on all of their spouses. Those ones I'm mentioning. They have gambling problems, alcohol problems, and bankruptcy. And, like, all 4 of them have, like, all of those issues. And so I think I think it takes probably a pretty unhealthy ENTP. Maybe I happen to know more unhealthy ENTPs than healthy ENTPs. But I think those are some pretty big issues, and I think it just comes from wanting, like, the new and, like, the thrill. And extroverted intuition, when unchecked by its SI, can be very, like, ooh, gambling is so fun because you never know what's going to happen, and you're taking this risk, and it heightens experiences, and it makes them seem a little bit more risky. It opens you up to more possibilities. Some of those possibilities are bad, but... Mm-hmm. And so I think I notice these issues more with the ENTPs than with other types. Like, a lot of these issues I don't notice with some of the other types I know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this is a stereotype that happens with ENTPs. You hear about, like, ENTPs are the ones who are most likely to break the law, or they're most likely to cheat, or I think it is a stereotype, but it seems like especially when you're in that loop of, like, extroverted feeling and extroverted intuition, you're looking for so much. You're looking for so much, and if you're not balancing it with TI, I think is really good at convictions and what do I think about these things, and is processing. If it's judging, like, the right or wrong of sort of actions, and then their SI is going to be a lot more, I think, slow to action and thinking through, like, the consequences of actions, whereas NE, I think, just does the action and is willing to, it's just like, hey, I want to do something and explore something new. And if you're not balanced with your introverted functions, you're going to run into some of these moral dilemmas, I guess.
Yeah, I think within the typology community, I notice a lot of ENTPs making excuses for themselves with having FI polar. And kind of making moral excuses for themselves. Well, of course I have these moral issues. I have FI polar. Like, well, what else am I supposed to do? And in the typology community, I don't like when people use it to make excuses for themselves. If you use typology in a way to make excuses for yourselves, I think you're doing it wrong. The way that I like to use typology is to call myself on my BS and try to be a better person. And I think that you might have FI polar, but I think that TI second fulfills a lot of what FI does, because if you look at a lot of TI DOMs, they're very principled. They understand their boundaries. This is what I will do. This is what I won't do. It's a lot of, like, self-respect. There's a lot of respect for other people, a lot of personal responsibility. I notice a lot of personal responsibility with TI DOMs. And so I think, like, a lot of TI DOMs, I'm not sure that I can think of actually any TI DOM that has cheated. Not to say that they couldn't. I'm sure they exist, but just to say that I think TI DOM fulfills that role that FI polar creates a lack in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's mostly all that I have to say about. Do you have any others for NE?
Yeah, no, I think that I put also scattered. There can be with I think a lot of different types of extroverts, but just sort of a busyness around ENTPs. Like they don't have necessarily time to slow down or time for individual people. You get this sometimes, I think, with FE when it's unhealthy that they're too busy for individual people, so they might be hopping around and talking to a lot of people, making a lot of jokes and like this humor, and so they might show up in the world a lot and interact with the world a lot, but they're not there for individual people in their lives, or especially important people in their lives, where those introverted functions are going to help you relate to like your spouse or kids or parents or whatever important relationships you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so second function, introverted thinking. This is the one where I think when ENTPs have introverted thinking developed really well in the form of having self-respect and a high level of personal responsibility, that's when I really start to like ENTPs. It's kind of like they put their money where their mouth is, you know? Otherwise, it can be kind of hypocritical. But yeah, so when it's undeveloped, I can notice a lot of hubris. I said this about ESTPs as well, but I can notice TI second can have a lot of hubris. It's instead of using it to check themselves and calling themselves on their own BS, it can be a lot of calling other people and defending why they are right. And they are always right. I've heard some ENTPs flat out say that. I am always right without exception. And that's kind of one of the first things you teach in school. Okay, if you're taking a multiple choice test or whatever, and they say the word always, and it's true or false, it's probably false, because things are very rarely always. And so it's one of those things that it's shocking when you hear that sort of thing from a TI second, but I hear it sometimes.
Yeah, I definitely have seen that TI arrogance in both ETPs if it's not, if it's not balanced, if it's unhealthy. I wrote they can care more about debate than relationships. So I think. ENTP caricature is the debater. I think sometimes they care more about winning arguments, which I think sometimes like might tie into a little bit to what you were saying, but they care more about winning arguments than like personal relationship. Whereas I think a healthy FE sort of recognizes how other people are doing, and takes into account other people and where they're at. I think unhealthy TI is just sort of like, my way or the highway. Like sort of that hubris, I guess.
Yeah, and I can get different flavors of unhealthy ENTP. Sometimes you get the ones that are really in FE, and so you never really hear what they truly believe, which is very contrary to the stereotype of the debater, you know. And then sometimes you do get the ones that are very contrarian, very argumentative, because it's just fun, you know what I mean? It's like they just, if it's fun to you, you just like choose that.
Yeah.
I heard one. He was rattling off all of his debate tactics, and they were kind of dirty tactics. They weren't clean TI. It was kind of playing dirty. So he was just rattling off all these tactics, and one thing that he said that I noticed a lot of ENTPs doing actually is argue what the other person said, not what they meant. And he's like, yeah, even if you know what they meant and you want to win the argument, just argue with what they literally said, and then they can't really argue back to you because they did literally say what you said. So it's intentionally ignoring subtext or intentionally ignoring tone of voice, or like maybe the statement was sarcastic and you just like literally, I don't know, it's just kind of a dirty tactic to be like, well, you didn't say, that's not what you said. You said X, Y, and Z. So don't try to act like you were saying A when in all reality they know that the person meant A.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's like they use TI as sort of as it's like a lower form of TI of like making excuses for themselves. So like justifying their wrong actions. I think healthy TI is very personal responsibility. Healthy TI, if you correct them or if they find a flaw, I think like TI DOMs are always searching for like, am I doing something wrong and how can I fix it? Like if they find an error in their thinking or in their ways, they're pretty quick to correct it, or if someone else comes with it. Whereas unhealthy TI, like the TI second, if it's not developed, can justify its actions in sort of this, precise language or changing of terms, or like loopholes is a prime, I think, ENTP.
Dirty loopholes, yeah.
Whereas to develop that TI, if you want true TI, you're gonna take personal responsibility. You're not looking for loopholes. You're looking for how can I be free from loopholes. Like, even if there were loopholes, I'm going to be correct because I'm living in such a just
you want to be reputable,
way.
You want to be respectable, of high character. You don't want to lose your character for the sake of winning an argument.
Right.
And it's one of those, you win the battle, lose the war when you do these loopholes. So in the short term, it's like that loophole won, but in the long term, you lose the relationship because you played dirty. Yeah, I think it's kind of like this choosing definitions for what suits them. Like, I knew one that was called out on cheating, and then he went this whole thing, well, I wouldn't call it cheating. He went into this whole, like, I wouldn't call it cheating. It's like, you slept with another person. What do you want? What do you want to call it? It was like a very textbook, like very black and white. Like, this is obviously cheating.
Yeah.
But they're like, no, I wouldn't call it cheating. Maybe some people would call it that, but I wouldn't call it. And it's like, why do you just use the normal definition of the word?
Yeah.
That can be like dirty TI. It's like, we're going to be very precise with the definition.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the advice here basically with TI is to take personal responsibility. I think we can find sometimes ENTPs avoiding personal responsibility and using unhealthy TI to justify that they are not responsible for their actions. But if you want to grow as a person, learn to start taking personal responsibility and accept where you've been wrong and start to rectify that.
What I'm unclear about with ENTPs is, do you think they know that they're wrong and just don't admit it? Or do you think that they really believe that they're in the right when they do stuff like that?
I feel like they've got to know.
That's what I kind of think too. You got to know. You got to be some kind of delusional to be thinking you really didn't cheat. When you yeah, I think, yeah, and I actually get the vibe sometimes ENTPs are very, these ones that I know that have done some of this stuff are pretty ashamed of that. It's like TI is like pretty responsible. TI can be very responsible. It's like, hey, this is not what you do. This was an incorrect, there was a line, you crossed it, that was wrong. And so I think maybe just getting better at, if someone calls you out on something and you actually believe that you're in the wrong, maybe just tell them to their face. Don't just secretly admit that you're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Move on to FE unless you got anything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sweet. Yeah, extroverted feeling. One thing I notice is there can be a lot of family chaos with ENTPs. Like, they're the black sheep of the family, or maybe they don't talk to their parents. I notice a lot of ENTPs are estranged from their parents. And I think part of it is there's that, if it's unhealthy, there's that TI hubris, and parents do not do well with that, with being talked back to and argumentative. So that's just, I can imagine as a parent, that could be annoying.
Yeah.
And then, but in a lot of these cases, it starts out like that, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse, and then, they're like just burning bridges with the family, and so eventually they get cut off. And then I notice that then, like, later in life, that they try to make amends. But maybe for, like, from 20 to 40, it seems like estranged with their family, and then maybe by the time they're 40, maybe it's because SI maybe starts coming back around at that point, then they try to make amends.
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed there can be like a keeping up of appearances. So we'd noticed this in the ESTPs also with FE in a similar spot, where there's like sort of this fakeness mask on. So when you're around a group, you're not really yourself. You're sort of just masquerading, or it's like we talked about charisma early on, and it's almost like this charisma to cover up this lack of TI. So again, when these functions aren't balanced, it's like you don't feel good about yourself because you haven't been personally responsible. And so you have this FE puffed upness, I guess, like, I'm trying to think. I think this can lead to some of the things like bad money management. I think buying a house that's too expensive, or buying a car that's too expensive, or buying multiple things that it's an FE way of like, I'm doing good. Look at my stuff that I have. And I think especially FE in this third spot can tend to that sort of overspending to look good and to keep up appearances.
Yeah, I've noticed, some of that keeping up appearances as well, where it's like you'll see them with the family, they act like this, and they're very appropriate. And then you see them with their bar buddies, and they're really different. And then you see them maybe like at church, or, these I'm just trying to name really distinct, like very different settings. then you see these kind of like, they put on this different persona, and then when you're around them long enough, then you're kind of wondering, like, what's the real one?
Right. Yeah, FE and unhealth can be very chameleon-like, so it changes. If you find yourself as a person, especially with FE changing in each environment you're in, that's a sign of your FE being in an unhealth. So it needs to be balanced more with healthy TI. TI is going to be itself everywhere it is. It's not changing to the environment.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think some degree of it is good, because that's where the charisma comes in. You tailor your type of humor to this type of person, sure. And to some degree of it's good. But we're talking about like the extreme setting where it's like you're one political party when you talk to these people, and then you have a different political affiliation when you talk to these people. Sure. When it comes down to your beliefs, like changing your TI beliefs, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say lying. Lies. I think, so introverted thinking, if it's healthy, is going to be very truthful. It doesn't matter, who's in the room. It's just, it has its beliefs, and the beliefs don't change depending on who's in the room. But FE then tailors, so it's pretty much just the same thing. It can be lying about your political beliefs. It can be loopholes to where maybe you could argue that it wasn't a lie if you use this loophole. And yeah. Or secret keeping, like, oh, I kept a secret. That's not a lie. And that's a fun argument to have.
Yeah. This could maybe go in SI also, but I've noticed...
Should I move on to the next one?
Yeah, we can probably.
Okay.
Looping through friends and relationships. So I sort of combined it with FE. I think FE is good at making friends and creating relationships. I think they're really good at the initial, like first instance meetups, getting people to like them. Especially, I think that FE mask can come off really well if you don't know a person very well. And so I think they're really good at creating relationships. So ENTPs might have a ton of relationships, but the low SI, not developed, they can sort of cycle through relationships and not have relationships long term. I mean, in more serious instances, that comes into like cheating. Like if you have a faithful spouse, then you have this FE that's good at developing your relationships. Maybe you develop a new relationship, cheat on someone, and then you lose this other person, and so you're cycling through that. But it can also just be through friendships or different things that aren't as serious. But if you haven't developed SI, you're not going to have as long-term relationships in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's that FE is very good at the acquaintance level. I do think that phrase, "win the battle, lose the war," is very true of what that FE can do. It's like on the short term, coming off very charismatic, and then on the long term, people realizing that it's fake, and so that it doesn't ultimately win the thing. I noticed this cycle of ENTPs working really hard and reaching some type of success. Maybe it's like, I'm thinking like career success predominantly, or this could be like a marriage or something, like, being in a relationship, then they get married, so they have something that was like successful, and then getting bored of it. And so then just creating, getting so bored, it's just like creating chaos just to stop being bored. And so then they end up like burning it down. Maybe it's, this arrow's good. They end up burning it down and then starting over. So, known ENTPs with like 5 marriages, because they are very good. They, or career-wise, I know ENTPs that have had a lot of careers and very successful careers, like not just random odd jobs, but a string of very successful careers.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're very intelligent. ENTPs are a very intelligent type, super charismatic, so they can do that really quickly. It seems like they can reach success really quick, then they get bored, and then burn it down. Now, in the career setting, I think it's a little less damaging. Like, if you want to try something new career-wise, yeah, it's fine. You do your life, do what you want. But when it comes to relationships, that's when it becomes a problem. And you got to wonder, like, am I running from something? What are the motives? Is boredom really the worst thing in life? Do I have to be entertained all the time?
Yeah, I think ENTPs are phenomenal at startups. Like, I think they're not necessarily made for that, but their personality is great for startups. Like, and in a business sense, obviously, yes, but also I think relationships. Like, they're great at starting up great relationships with people. They're great at starting up, businesses and a lot of things. They're great at startups, and it can be hard, I think, as an ENTP probably, to do the startup, get it to success, but then where do you go from there? Without, sort of abandoning the startup that you created. It can be hard to. So I think
everything gets mundane eventually.
Yeah.
Is I think the big issue for ENTPs.
Eventually get into this SI where it's like, okay, now it's routine. Now I have to do sort of I'm getting to the spot where I'm doing the same thing over and over. And so maybe there needs to be some any balance with it of like, hey, maybe you've done the startup, maybe enough SI to stay with the company, for example, but get some any where you're exploring different routes of the company, like maybe, I'm trying to think of a company example, an ice cream shop. Maybe you're
a lot of ENTPs I know have their own.
Yeah.
A lot of ENTPs I know are not in a company.
Yeah, a lot of them have literally their own startups. Mm-hmm.
Their own businesses, yeah. Because I think they're really good at that.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, finding ways to stay in that company longer term while doing new things within it so that you're still happy as a person.
Yeah, I do know when I'm listening off kind of these ENTPs, there's one in particular, I think I said at the beginning they were all male. There's one who's a female, and I'm about to talk about her. And she hopped around to a bunch of stuff, and then she found one thing that she really liked, and it just fit with her TI. It was, and then she stuck with it. And so I think it's just a matter of, you hop around, find your stuff, and then, but try to find something. Try to find the one thing. I don't think it's impossible for ENTPs.
Yeah.
And I think she's had a lot more success. The thing about when you hop around so much is you kind of shortcut. Like financial success, it's hard to get traction when you only do things for like 5-year spurts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you start to get, I think it's John Maxwell, maybe I've been playing people talk about like, there's initial success, but then there's like impact, then there's like legacy. There's like, you can have sort of an initial success, but a lot of stuff that impacts not just you, but like your kids or people 10 years down the road, like after you die, your business is still successful. A lot of that is developed by healthy SI, where you've stayed in a thing for a long time. And so I think that can lead to some of this unhappiness with ENTPs, where they're doing a lot and they're getting a lot of successes, but it's not enough because it's a lot of short-term successes that eventually fall through because they're not sticking with it long-term enough to create impact, to create legacy, to create, I think there's a richness in a marriage that you've had for 40 years, whereas if you've had a bunch of 5-year marriages, that might leave you frustrated at like, where's this thing that I want?
Yeah, like lying, like it probably just keeps you, I would imagine it'd keep you up at night.
Yeah.
At some point. Maybe not on the second marriage, but on the 5th marriage or
yeah.
Starting to, I think it can be a little depressing, I think. I kind of would marvel at, I have some of those same issues of staying in things for a long time because I like the initial startup phase and then it gets kind of boring once it gets routined. And I was looking at, when I was a teacher, there was a ESFJ teacher, so I have all the same functions as an ENTP, and he had been teaching in the same school for 20 years, and he had a huge reputation. He had probably like 20 students every year come back and be like, "We loved your class, it was so great," and he had such a reputation, and I think that was one time where I started to actually kind of respect that. I was like, sometimes I look down and I'm like, oh, same job for 20 years, what are they doing? That's so boring. But then I started to look at it and I'm like, look at all the impact. That's like 20 kids every year coming back, and you get this, when you're in the same spot, people know where to find you and can express their gratitude. Whereas if you've moved to a new city by that point and you've had, 3 different jobs in those last 20 years, people will not express as much gratitude. 'Cause for one, they don't know how to find you, but your reputation kind of like compounds and grows exponentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think FE wants some of that. I think some of that FE third wants the gratitude and to be shown appreciation and how you've impacted me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the key you mentioned. Like, find something that you really resonate with and then stick to it long term. Because, obviously I think ENTPs know this more than most people, but don't stick to something you don't like. And, but if it's something that you resonate with, and maybe there's parts you don't like about it, at least stick with it longer term, and you'll see some of those benefits come down the road.
Yeah, I think kind of the phrase, like, the grass is always greener on the other side is something that I think ENTPs can kind of fall into. Like, oh, if only over here, this is the job I want, or this is the person I want, and kind of hopping around. It's like a Justin Bieber lyric, actually, but he's an EP as well, so you get some of these same issues. But this is really cheesy that I'm mentioning this right now, but it's like the grass isn't always greener on the other side; it's green where you water it. Which I think, wow, so cheesy that I just said that, but I think it's true in the sense I think SI does that really well. SI creates a lot of stability, a lot of long-term, same job for 20 years, and anything can become very green.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of people, like, you're like, oh, I should buy, this is just an analogy, but maybe like, oh, I should buy this house. The lawn is so nice. And then you live there for a while, and then you don't upkeep the yard. And so what was once a green grass now becomes brown. And so then you're like, oh, better buy another house. Oh, green grass over there. Okay, I'll go. Mm-hmm. And so if your grass continues to become brown, you may want to look at, SI and how is SI, upkeeping things.
Yeah.
I think one prompt that I think was good, we said this for ENFPs as well, he's in like this mentoring group, and the question that they wanted them to journal on for a page was, what lesson should you have learned in the last 5 years that you didn't? And how would you like to, in the next 5 years, make sure that you actually do learn that lesson so you're not repeating the same cycle? And I think introverted sensing is really good. It's going inward and it's processing its experiences. Yep. And I find that a lot of SI DOMs aren't making the same mistakes repeatedly, because if you spend so much time processing your memories, and that will include your mistakes, it's like you feel it more acutely because you're spending time in there processing it, and so then you don't make it again because you've processed it, you realized why you made that mistake, it feels really real because you went into your memories and were processing it, and then you don't make it again. And so it's kind of like facing the past instead of running from the past. And so I think, like, SI DOMs I don't find to be burning bridges very often. I mean, I'm sure some do, but I think SI tends to have a lot more longevity. So I think it's good to just go inward and process, what do you have problems with? Not that I don't want to make it sound like all ENTPs have these problems with, gambling and drinking and cheating or whatever. But if you do happen to have some of those problems, maybe going in and processing, is there a void? Is it like loneliness? What's the source of that? And maybe it's something less egregious. And how do you want to not repeat that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The biggest thing I think mentioned this for most extroverts, it's to slow down. So, I mean, same goes for introverts, like sort of speed up is sort of the advice in a way. But for you, slowing down looks like getting into your SI and getting into your TI. So I think that question you asked, I think that's a great question to journal on. Like, what have you done the past 5 years? What have you done that you regret? And what could you learn from that? Like, take some time to think through your life. Slow down. I think FE and E can be very busy, very, very active. Take time to actually slow down, not always be with people, and to reflect on where your life's headed. Not just in the next 3 years, maybe the next 10 years. Like, where do you want your life to be? And what are the actions you've done that are going to help you get there? And I think getting into TI looks like, if you're not certain on some beliefs, make sure to get certain on beliefs that you have, especially beliefs in regard to relationships in your life. Like, what are your beliefs about marriage, about family? Because those will impact a lot of your life and will help guide you when you're making any decisions. If you have a strong TI belief system, your NE can explore within the framework of that TI, and I think you'll be a lot healthier because of it.
Yeah, I want to reiterate, I love ENTPs. I always feel bad kind of at the end of these videos. I think especially this one, just because the examples were so, they were kind of intense examples. And even the ENTPs that I know that are doing all those things, they're still some of my favorite people. They're still the funnest to be around. I still hang out with them. It doesn't stop me from hanging out with them. I know I wouldn't marry any of them, but it doesn't stop me from hanging out with them. And they're still some of my favorite people, and I don't know why, I just have kind of a soft spot for ENTPs. I think a lot of people write ENTPs off when they're doing some of this black sheep behavior. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I just have kind of a soft spot for them. I don't know, that's the thing with ENTPs, they suck you in. This is how they get so many, the ones I know, how they get 8 wives, because they are so charismatic and they are so fun to be around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you guys are super fun to be around. I think ENTPs, especially with the strong TI, a strong healthy belief system are phenomenal. Like it, you might be a healthy ENTP and watching this video and you're like, man, I don't really resonate with, but
I mentioned so many egregious examples. I wish that I know like healthy ENTPs and then this really bad spectrum. I don't know anything in between.
Yeah, so healthy TI and SI, you look really good. Like, you don't just show up appearance-wise really well, but you, I think, are a phenomenal personal responsibility person. And I think it does start to show up in, like, that ESFJ coworker that you mentioned, like, where, you know, you might already be seeing an impact of people coming to you because you've stayed in something long-term, and you're starting to reap the fruits of that. And I think that's sort of an encouragement to, if you're not in that spot, to stick with things longer term and start to plant, water the grass to make it greener, and see what fruit it bears.
One thing I'm super grateful about is ENTPs encouraging me to think differently. This is a super... Yeah. I'm about to tell a very embarrassing story. It's embarrassing to me. I grew up in a very religious context. And I think I shared in a previous video that in middle school I would read a bunch of marriage books. So a lot of these were Christian marriage books, and Christian marriage books are pretty much known for being super sexist.
They pretty much suck.
They pretty much suck. Yeah, I don't recommend it. Especially I was in middle school, so my brain's not fully developed, and so it's not the best thing to be doing. Anyway, so I'm reading these Christian marriage books, and a lot of them are saying just like really terrible stuff, like borderline just like rape stuff, and like if you're in a disagreement, then the woman needs to submit and the man's right if you can't work it, and all this stuff. So you get all this stuff. Anyways, so this is so embarrassing that I did this. So Garrett and I started dating, and his dad's an ENTP. And I don't know why. Maybe this was just TE trying to be like, okay, I'm going to show him that I'm responsible and respectful or whatever. So we go over to his house, and I'm just like, I think he was kind of unsure. We were super young when we started dating, and so his dad, I think, was kind of unsure about it or whatever. And so I was like, don't worry. I can't say it. It's so embarrassing. So I just told him, I was like, don't worry, we'll be super responsible. And I know things like if we get in an argument, we disagree, then Garrett's the one who's right. And I just started like spouting off this stupid internalized sexism pretty much. And I appreciate the ENTP because the ENTP didn't let me just sit there and think this dumb crap. He was the first one that ever like challenged that belief. And that set me on like a whole different belief system, because then I started thinking about it. I had not been around anyone who had ever challenged anything like that before. And I am so grateful for that. Mm-hmm. And he was probably one of the first people that I ever was like, oh, he disagrees with something religious. People do that. People disagree with this. I guess not all people within religion agree on some of this stuff. That's where you get some good like ENTP stuff. And so he was like, no. He just kind of, and he was nice about it. But that's still like, that's one of my most embarrassing moments when I think back. That's so embarrassing.
Yeah, I think ENTPs can be phenomenal thinkers and phenomenal challengers of thought. Like, especially ones who, some who like love to study, whatever topic they're interested in. But they can dive deep into their culture, and they can really challenge the thought process of that and come with really eloquent ideas and stuff, and that's I think a rich value they bring. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, ENTPs. We're rambling like ENTPs now.
Super sick. Yeah, well. I have to prove that I like you guys after I just said that you don't all cheat and have alcohol issues, okay? I know that. And even if you do, I still like you. Well, we're having a problem now. Okay.
All right.
Okay, nice.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for watching. You're still here. Bye.